Hey, Planeswalkers, Mythras here. Hope you're doing well and staying safe. Today is a great day. Many of you asked me to procure a best of 3 tier list for you. So you have asked and you shall receive. So I am ecstatic to have pulled this together. I've spent the last few days really working hard on this, so I apologize. I took a break from my general broadcasting to pull together this list for you. So the benefit is some of it and layout is similar, but again, that doesn't mean whether it's a great best of 1 deck, it's going to be great best of 3 and vice versa. But the thing that I always say is that within every best of 3 match, there is at least a best of 1 in there. So with that said, just for those of you that are new, what is a tier list here? Well, a tier list in terms of our Magic the Gathering here is a subjectively ranked deck by its viability in high-level competitive settings, and the way that I do it is a tiered system of 1, 2, and 3. So I use a numerical format and I don't use halvesies. So I do that to make and force myself into bucketing things more definitively instead of saying, this one's kind of a tweener. So one of the things that I want to just talk about here that I will cover for you today is I will cover the deck lists. So you'll have access to that and all the content available for you there. Additionally, key observations. So these observations are different from best of 1. Some synergies with it, but things that are definitely needed to be called out and discussed. Additionally, just a caveat there, this is the first time I'm doing a best of 3, so historically the ability to connect our data dots, as I like to say, and talk about this journey, this is us putting a stake in the ground to continue that conversation on the best of 3 next time. Now, I did go and analyze, so very excited about that for you. And the last thing that I want to talk about again is I will go through and do a high-level dive into each of the decks, but you'll absolutely have access to all the deck lists and a deeper dive that includes gameplay and more defined guides for you for those portions of the decks that you wish to check out. So before we go ahead and take a look at the list, I just want to say thank you as always. Please feel free to continue to support the channel by subscribing down there. If you enjoy the video, please like it. Also, to stay up to date, you can like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter and Twitch to stay on top of content that I'm rolling out for you, just like this. And additionally, if you really enjoy the tier list, this is one of the best ways to stay in touch. All right, Planeswalkers, so what do we got going on here? Before I show you the deck list, I'm going to tease you here quickly. I am actually currently in the top 900s. I actually hit 300 earlier in the day. Unfortunately, I did lose 2 matches to go backwards. But one of the reasons why I like to show this is just for you to know that you are safe, because these opinions and the information is gathered throughout a ton of research, a ton of content, a ton of looking into and gameplay, as well as a high competitive layer. And particularly for this season, I hit it in 5 days and have maintained top 1500, and we still got 6 days left. So very happy about that. All right, enough of that plug there anyway. Just want to say here's the tier list for you. So I will go through each of the decks here, and then we'll talk about some of those observations here in a second. But for those of you that are already ready, I wanted to kind of keep you on the hook there just to kind of talk through these things, because it is very important. It's not just, hey, give me the top deck, here's how we're going to play. You have to have an understanding from a broader perspective as well. This list is available for you down below in the description, so you can absolutely go check it out. Additionally, I have added a link to my website that if you're looking for the collective deck lists all in one spot, you can go and check that out. So that is something I did differently from the best of 1 tier list. I know many of you really like that and appreciate that. So again, great feedback. Please keep it coming, and you can give me additional pointers or things that are helpful for you down in comments. All right, Planeswalkers, so what do we got going on? Probably no surprise here. With our Sultai Ramp. This was a best of 1 deck as well at tier 1. Additionally, we have Temur Clover at tier 1. Now, a couple callouts particularly to this that we'll come back to here within the observations in a minute. Next, in tier 2, we got Simic Flash, Orzhov, Yorion Control. We got Azorius Yorion Control, Temur Flash, Rakdos Sack, Temur Yorion Elemental, Simic Ramp, Mono red, we have mono green, we also have Dimir Flash and Azorus Flyers, and then also a Grixis mid-range deck. Next, moving into Tier 3, we got Pawblade or Boros Houndmaster. We have Cycling, and this one particular is Boros Lurrus Cycling, so I'll comment on that in a minute. Next, we have Rakdos Knights, Gruul Aggro / mid-range, Mono Whites, Life Gain particular. This one's got a flavor on Mono Black. Additionally, we have a Mardu Winata Sack deck, Sultai mid-range, Mardu Knights, and then Izzet Spells, and finally Mono Red Cavalcade. So a couple things here. That is the list. There were things that I would say primarily between Tier 2 and Tier 3 that could have been shifted around more. And then maybe, and this is a very particular note that I want to say here, is I think there could be potential for one or two decks out of the Tier 2 that could be in Tier 1. Now, I'm saying that because part of it is best of 3 to me tends to be a little bit more of a moving target than best of 1. And the reason why I say that is once a deck like Sultai Ramp becomes very solidified, even Temur Clover, we begin to see another 1 or 2 decks climbing up the ranks, particularly to offset those particular play styles. So that's a big consideration, and I think that gap, again, this is speculation from me, but it's been working really well, and I've commented on this before, is going to be some sort of control deck that will probably fit in to that pocket at least over the next, maybe, what do we have, 3 weeks to a month before we get the next set. Additionally, I don't necessarily foresee any bans coming here before then. So that is one thing that I wanted to call out. Next, we have a couple other key observations that I think are very important here. The first one here is we look at the tier list. We begin to see more balanced Tier 2, Tier 3, and a little bit more out of Tier 1. So in the best of 1, I had 4 up there. Here I have 2. Again, I think there's still kind of some shuffling that could happen within the Tier 2 into a Tier 1. And then similar style for Tier 3 into Tier 2 or vice versa. But one key thing here that is a big call out is what I call kind of this go wide trend. So when we looked at the last tier list, particularly for best of 1, and then what I did is I went back and kind of analyzed the decks from a best of 3 perspective and pulled forward that here, even though I don't have a video produced for you guys or a specific list. We know that with those bannings, the Cat Oven, Reclamation, Growth Spiral, and then everyone's favorite, Teferi. And that has really, again, not only did I cover it in best of 1, but best of 3, opened the playing field a little bit in terms of decks. So we begin to see a little bit more, what I'll just say, healthier range of decks that become playable. So that is something to keep in mind, especially from a competitive level. Now, I get questions all the time, well, do I have to have a Tier 1 deck to make Mythic? I absolutely do not believe that. I think you can absolutely do it on a Tier 3 deck. It's going to depend on what you're hitting at what tier within the game. So, gold, platinum, diamond, and then into Mythic, those kinds of things. Probably screwed up on some of that because it's been a while. But it does change in each of those tiers. So you got to keep that in mind as well as you play. So that's one big piece for you as well. And so you can absolutely do it with a Tier 3 deck. And in fact, sometimes I just enjoy playing those more. And as you guys see, a lot of the videos that I produce, live gameplay for you as well. I know it's recorded and then put up, but I don't edit. If I do, it's because of power outage or something like that happens every once in a while. Act of God, I would say. But anyway, with that said, I think you can absolutely do it. So these are just really good decks for you. I would say that they're not like jank decks, and I like playing jank once in a while, but it's more of a defined set for you. All right, so another key thing to call out here is kind of twofold. So in terms of deck types, we definitely saw the ramp get destroyed. Oddly enough, Sultai Ramp, I know again it's been solidified recently again with the Red Bull matches and tournaments, But Sultai Ramp is definitely a big one, or insert, I call it Sultai insert deck list here, is been a very powerful one in the format. Again, this is important because I think it will open that space for something more broad. But I will say, I don't think many people necessarily saw that it was going to be Sultai Ramp as one of the defined winners immediately after the ban. So that brings me into the next point here. Temur Clover was one that I was speculating on day one. I think this one was a little bit more obvious because we already had the deck pre-constructed, and this is also a good segue into some of the other decks that I was mentioning here, like the Boros cycling deck. I had used the Jeskai one in best of one. This is also a good option. This one's more direct and linear. I threw this one in here because a lot of you enjoy more optimized decks sometimes. These aren't all always optimized for you because I try to do a deck a day, and then the ability to come back to those decks and stay up to date 100% on everything can be tough. So they're going to give you the right shell that you need to get off and play. I also highly encourage you as an individual to tweak it to the way that you enjoy playing. Particularly if you'll notice, I did a Simic Flash deck, a Zoras Yorion deck, and then a Simic Ramp deck all by myself this time. And I shouldn't say all by myself, but I brewed those specific ones to get a little bit more practice, but also to the way that I enjoy playing and the way that I saw the meta. So I highly encourage that for you as well. But the point with Clover and the point with Boros Lurrus cycling here is we do begin to see this archetypes kind of coming full circle. So what do I mean by that? A lot of the stuff that was really popular, again, another one's the Rakdos Knights, Mardu Knights, kind of a deal as well, are beginning to come back into play and getting a lot of action within the new meta, which I think is an important consideration and things to keep in mind as well. Another call out here is I believe, even though I did see Rakdos Sack perform fairly well here recently again, I do have this one at a tier 2. So I think early on in the season, it was probably more of a tier 2. It's starting to make a slight comeback. This one in particular is Croaky's. I've seen different iterations of it. You can go check out the Red Bull one that recently did very well. I think it won. But also the Judith is always a big piece. So it still plays very well and strong. I will say, though, that I think the ability to command the field like it used to is just not as good as it was. So that good old cat oven and the constant ping, nightmare if you're playing against it, best if you're playing it, was a thing. So this could also still be in consideration and contention for a tier 1 spot. I think it's still early in my opinion, but definitely could end in that space. So I did want to call some of those things out. The other last piece that I think is very important here is we really see the monocolored decks begin to fall down. In the best of one, we generally have a more aggro-led approach. Mono red, again, consideration on fringe, but mono green for sure in tier 1. We see these decks fall into tier 2, and then additionally, a lot of them go from being a tier 2 into a tier 3. So that is a big piece. The other thing that I want to call out here that I talked about was just this whole concept of mid-range. I think mid-range does better when you have some sort of counter. So I think Grixis definitely has gone up the ladder, but then we begin to see some of these other mid-rangey type decks go a couple steps back. The other piece that I want to call it is I did not feel strong enough putting Izzet spells in tier 2 for one reason. Again, there's a lot of instant death, a lot of things that we can do with some of these other decks within the field. I would struggle to put this tier 2 because unless your sideboard's full of counters, this one is not fully counter built. Again, it's more of an Izzet spells aggro type deck. If you run a more Izzet control type deck, I think that's got a lot more ability to become a tier 2 deck. So that could be a consideration for you. Additionally, Mono Red Cavalcade to me kind of falls out of the tier 2 into tier 3. So just a couple of call outs. Mardu Knights is one of my favorite decks. Definitely made Mythic on this last couple seasons, 2 seasons ago. I think the potential is there again from a tier 2, potentially even Rakdos Knights, but the best of 3 matchup lineup is a lot different, and the strategy tends to shift a little bit more, particularly when we have a lot of strong stuff coming out of the Sultai Ramp and a lot of ability to play with our Temur Clover here. So those are some big things. Now, obviously, Clover gets shut down pretty quickly once we knock out the Clovers, but you still got to hit those cards, and if we're only sideboarding 4 of in terms of destroying those artifacts, you still don't necessarily have the best chance of hitting your answer there. So those are all the considerations I wanted to cover with you. Again, if you got questions, comments, please let me know down below. And again, before we go ahead and get into our last portion of today's best of 3 tier list, I just want to say thank you. As always, appreciate your support. Please feel free to subscribe down over there. You can also like the video if you're enjoying it. Like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter and Twitch to stay up to date on new content coming your way. At this time, I'm going to move into kind of the high-level portion of the decks. Please feel free to leverage the list down below. You'll have access to it, like I said, right away. You can go to my website and get the DL of all the lists that you want and import them into your arena here. And with that said, I know we do get a lot of newer player questions all the time, craft-heavy questions all the time. My advice for new players, I do want to just throw this out here, is take a look at the Boros cycling deck here. You don't need Luris. Going to be the cheapest craft-heavy deck and also a great one for best of 1 and potentially best of 2 for you to get off the races. Additionally, it's actually, I think, is absolutely rotation-proof right now. So that's not going to go away right away. Keep that in mind, and I think you'll be right out of the gate off to the races. All right, Planeswalkers, let's go ahead and take a look and see what we got going on here now. I'm going to breeze through these, but if you got questions, comments, let me know. Gameplay, action, deck lists down below in the tier list. All right, so we got Sultai Ramp. So the big piece here, again, this was a clear winner coming out. This one is particularly focused. I'm going to move down over here on that turn 2 slot. We got good ramp here with Euro as always. We got our land lower. This is a big piece here, the extinction event, the ability to maintain the board control. We got some cycle here with Teffi. Nissa is a great closer for us. Additionally, Hydroid Krasis can be a great closer. And we got a lot of good options. The ability to remove our opponent's cards from their hand or things from their graveyard is very beneficial. And then here is a very powerful sideboard in terms of mirror matches and a lot of the things that we can definitely shore up as well. All right, on to the next one. Temur Clover. So again, this was a big one that I had talked about early on. I know I got some feedback around Nissa and the deck being optimized. Yes, Aaron Gartler's list is great. Feel free to play that one. The sideboard is also, I'll say, maybe slightly more optimized here for the best of 1 and best of 3 matchup. I just like this one because it was unique and one of the top ones that I saw right out of the gates as the meta was kind of getting defined. But I also like having the Nissa option in there, but we do lose a couple synergies here with additional Escape to the Wilds and Aether Gust. So those are a couple callouts. Absolutely, I do have an older version. You can go ahead and check that one out as well. That is Aaron's list. For many of you that know, he is the Clover guy. All right, on to the next one. So there's a plug for Aaron. Simic Flash here. So this is a tier 2 deck. This one I would actually consider tier 1 right now for a couple of reasons. One, based given off the tier 1 decks. What I found is Simic Flash definitely stomps Sultai insert deck list. You guys can go look at my tweets about this, but this was actually the deck list that I used to hit, and this was my deck list used to hit top 300. So I know it's competitive. I went 15-1 with it in best of 3. I lost to a mono red deck, which again, that's a terrible matchup for this. So if Simic does begin to rule the roost, or get its position in that tier 1, I think we can absolutely guarantee that there's going to be a aggro-y deck in that space as well. So something of control, maybe something of aggro, kind of keep that balance. I think that 3 to 4 deck list check and balance is pretty healthy in that tier 1 space always. But again, a lot of color for you here. This one's really optimized at 4 drops, focusing on some delay in terms of aggro, but then really packing a punch on the counters. And then here's the sideboard. Again, continue to optimize it from my standpoint, because just getting more at bats, knowing what I need and how to work it is very important. Next, Orzhov Yorion Control. I think this deck became way stronger in best of 3. We got a lot more options here. We get a little bit more time to work on that sideboard, but here again is the deck. If we're not playing creature-based decks, we got a lot of things we can optimize with that sideboard. Here's the sideboard as well, and a lot of things that we can use against those good old nasty Sultai decks. All right, next, Azorius Yorion Control. So this was my brew again. I really like this one. I have a ton of fun. It's very competitive. Again, kind of similar. We have the ability to move out a lot of cards that we don't necessarily need in terms of our sideboard, and then it begins to be fairly focused in terms of the countering ability and other things, but also giving us some additional backup on some aggro decks, because that's going to be its one weakness is aggro. And then if we can move more into the control side of the house, we got a lot of great options here with Azorius Control. Next, we have Temur Flash. So I really like Temur Flash. I think this one has the ability, again, as well, to outperform. Thing is, though, is the doubling up of colors that kind of work against each other. You may want to remove something like a Frilled Mystic. Again, just kind of a couple thoughts there, but the ability to play Wilt and take out artifacts or enchantments is very enticing. We got a lot of other good options. Plus, you can always update your sideboard to be a little bit more viable against some of the other counter decks, and additionally some of the other decks like Sultai. So those are some good options there, and the access to a third color is pretty good, especially against some of those aggro decks that we could run into. All right, Rakdos Sack. Again, this is Croaky's list. I've covered this before. A couple of the key callouts. This one uses Weaponized Monsters and Fiend Artisan, 2 cards that you could definitely optimize this deck for a little bit more. I know the Red Bull one, that one is slightly different, but again, not, I want to say, very different. And that's part of the fun of tweaking. Now here's the sideboard as well, and you know, for me, again, as I mentioned, it is a lot to go back consistently on these decks. I do my best to kind of give you the full-blown shells and plays because I think it's important. A variation of 1 or 2 cards I don't think is going to make can make a difference, but in terms of play style, it's a pretty fast learning curve. All right, here we go with Temur Yorion Elemental. So this deck has a lot of ability, I think, to perform really well. I get a lot of questions around why Terror of the Peaks. It kind of can work against the deck, but the reality is if it sticks, and you're going to do a lot of damage. But I think there are remnants of new Temur Yorion type decks coming up. So I think this is going to be a big one to watch for us here as well. Again, a very nice sideboard optimized for aggro and then some control. All right, one of my favorite decks, Mono Red Aggro. I know I get a lot of questions about this one. So this was my version of it that I played. Definitely top 1200 off this. I think you can absolutely do it again. A lot of questions I got around is why not Embercleave 4 of? Yes, you can absolutely do that. I don't think there's a problem with that. I played Rimrock, so I'm going to just call this out here. Why I played Rimrock here was the ability early on against more creature-heavy decks, also mirror match. I felt Rimrock gave me the advantage. Now with the meta shifting, again, those could be some considerations for you to keep in mind. Next, here's a sideboard, pretty much more so set for life gain, which we don't see a ton of anymore. Other things like this Irrelevant Revelers, a big one for destroying artifacts. There are other creatures that we can use to do that. But all said and done, lots of good options there. That's kind of fun. And for the record, Planeswalkers, I know this stuff's really competitive because, as I mentioned with my Simic Flash deck, I ran into some mono red decks. I did beat one, but one definitely blew me out of the water. So can be a great best of 3 deck. All right, mono green Stompy. So this is Rumpty's deck. Rumpty was #1 at one point. Very, very great deck. I think it runs really well. I think this is also going to be one to keep an eye on for us. Mono green has done very well. And additionally, I think there's going to be a lot of things, that we're going to be able to do going into the rotation. So this deck list will get hit fairly decently, but there's still going to be a lot of options. We gained a lot with M21 that we can keep our eyes on. So again, good old Scavenging Ooze. I love that as main board. We got a lot of very powerful stuff here that's going to stick around. All right, and for the record, I did kind of manipulate that deck list for fun as well, so give you some fun options. Next, we have Dimmer Flash. So this one is more mutate based. I really like it. For the record, I've also, again, Simic Flash player for best of 3, began to see a lot of this again. So you got to be really careful. There's a way this deck can really blow you out, especially once the board state gets built. So lots of good options here that can happen. Next, here's some of the sideboard cards. Again, very, very optimized for that more so control against the non-creature based decks, which is going to really, really help and catch your opponents off guard. Next, we have a good old Azorus Flyers. So I kept this one in here for a reason at tier 2. This could have been potentially a debate for tier 3, but it is a fast deck. It is an efficient deck. It does have counters, and there are definitely things that you can do in the sideboard, again, to strengthen it. Apologies, I still needed to update the Teferi, so that's gone. But that gives you 4 more slots of fun things you could do. I would probably put in more counters, or the +1/+1 indestructible for your creatures as well. But I really, really like this deck list. It's been a lot of fun. Next, we got Rixus Midrange. So this one, for me, out of all the mid-range ones, I think is the best. And again, as I mentioned, that is primarily because of the main board counters. Additionally, we get access to some great sideboard counters, and we can control the field really well. So I think this one's got a lot of good potential as well. This one was by Mad Dog. Mad Dog's a great player, and I really, really enjoy this list. Only concern, again, which is usually my concern, is just all slot 2 drops, but we do get a ton of access to some very powerful stuff here that we can optimize. All right, next into our tier 3. So Pawblade. So Pawblade, my friends, I do not feel is as strong, unfortunately, in best of 3 for a couple of reasons. You shut down Winata, it's pretty much game over, in my opinion. There's a lot of things that you can do, but if you have some control, you got that exile, you can just destroy this board pretty quickly. However, with that said, it's still a great deck. It can take advantage of a lot of things, and when it gets built and our opponents cannot respond, you're gonna do some damage. I did play one of these earlier today, but they won. I went 2-1, but they won the first match because they got the surprise, and then I optimized it for Winata. So again, great cards here in terms of sideboards. This enchant's going to be a big one in terms of things like Clover. So we got a lot of good options and access to things. Next, Boros Cycling. So this is the updated Boros list for you guys. This one's rotation proof. We've got all Ikoria here. Yes, all Ikoria. So that's beautiful. You don't need to craft Lurrus, can you? Absolutely yes, but this is a commons uncommons deck. Got to be one of the best ones in my opinion. No sideboard. So you could put in counters here if you wanted. So that would be the cycle counters, but you're also gonna have to update your mana base. You could put a bunch of mana on the sideboard here and make it a Jeskai if you wanted. I got great feedback from you about the Jeskai one not being optimized, particularly that one is also a more go wide strategy, so it's going to play better against the field. And it also removes the only out of being Zenith Flare, because if we get stuck there, it's going to be a lot harder for us really to get through and win off those cards, especially with the way that the meta is set up. But I definitely felt strong in terms of keeping this at a tier 3. Could be tier 2, but I think that's where it's at today. Rakdos Knights, again, could be tier 2, but I think it's tier 3. Again, just so many more answers right now to a lot of these things. It's a very, very fast deck, but again, the meta is heavily oriented towards the ability to take care of a lot of creatures, and what I call 2 for 1. For one card, you get a lot more off the board, which can create a problem, especially if you run out of juice. However, if you get Stormfist down, you got some good livability. Again, here's the sideboard. We got a lot of good things here. I would probably add in more duress. This is great against our tier 1 Clove deck. All right, next we're getting into some more Gruul aggro, or another aggro deck. So this was a fun list here. I really enjoyed this one. Again, great options for creature-based deck. Can move quickly. And then again, from a optimization standpoint, we got a lot of good options here to play around certain things. We don't have a lot in terms of the Sultai decks that we can really maneuver around, but it's great against Simic and great against blue in general with shifting Ceratops here. Next, we got Mono White. So I think Mono White definitely fell back quite a bit. There are good answers to some of the, I'll say the Temur Clover deck. Not as many good answers to Sultai, so we just got to be cognizant of that. Does build fast, lots we can do. Again, just not much there that we can take to action against the Sultai deck. But again, very viable against other decks on the board. Plus, I know many players did early on last season hit Mythic with Mono White. All right, Mono Black aggro, again, a old tier 1 deck, but this one just does not play well against some of the more control stuff in the field. It is a great deck. It is a fast deck. It can do a lot of damage. We do have some good options in terms of removing a lot out of our opponent's hands. But again, with a more Sultai-dominated field and Clover-dominated field, this deck's going to have a little bit more trouble keeping up. All right, next we got Mardu Winazak. So this one could be a tier 2. I was debating on this one pretty heavily. Recently played quite a few players with this one, actually, with Simic. Again, similar story. Would generally split 2 and 1 once I optimized the deck for what I knew they were playing. This one has Cat Oven, so this is obviously banned as well, so we got to keep that in mind. But this is a very, very interesting option right now. What I would do is I would drop these 4 and then play Village Rites and a few other things to enable. You could also get in another Mayhem Devil and throw in some Judas, and it's going to be a beautiful, beautiful deck. And here's some great sideboard options as well. So for me, that one, again, is tier 3, definitely tier 3 with Cat Oven. But I think it has the opportunity to go tier 2. I've seen it play competitively as well. Next, we got Sultai Midrange. So this deck is a lot of fun. We got a lot of great answers, but we don't have good answers, in my opinion, to some of that current meta. So we're going to struggle against that. So we just got to be careful. So I felt this was more of a tier 3 deck. And then again, here are some great sideboard cards. We got a few things we can play with here, but not a ton. Next, we have Mardu Knights. So again, I love this deck. This was sad for me to put this in tier 3 because it was my deck. This one particularly focused on Chance for Glory. Fast deck, lots we can do. But again, against current meta, it's just not the best. We do have Shield Breaker in here, but the good old lovely Sultai is going to be a big problem for us. All right. On to the next one. Is it spells? So again, I'm a huge fan of Izzet spells. I think this one's more aggro focused. If you optimize your sideboard a little bit better, I think this has the ability to be a T2 deck. Here again, it's primarily focused against aggro and against creature-based decks. So even though with Axis Cyber we do have miscast, we do have some negates, we have Narset, and we do have the ability to do some things with Royal Scions, I just don't think it's enough. I think we'd want to take another pop at optimizing that to pull it into that tier 2 more so. Next, Mono Red Cavalcade. Love this deck, you guys. I think it's a lot of fun. This was a tough one for me to put down to tier 3 as well. I just don't see it performing well right now in best of 3, but it is still a fun, great option for us to play. And again, something you can absolutely probably make Mythic with. Next, and not least, Simic Adventures. So this was a really fun deck. Saw run really well early this season. I think there's a lot of opportunity here with this deck. Lots of things we can do. The one call out here is the sideboard's just not optimized a ton for Sultai. I think we could maybe tweak a few things, main board and potentially sideboard, without totally destroying the engines that we got going on, to make it potentially pull it into that tier 2 spot. So, all right. With that said, Planeswalkers, lots of talking, lots of decks. I think it's like 25 decks for us here, which is great. Just a couple final thoughts here before we take off. First off, again, thank you so much for those of you that stayed through it with me the whole way. Appreciate it. Additionally, please feel free to subscribe to the channel down over there. Like the video if you enjoy it. You can like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter and Twitch, stay up to date on this content. Please go check out the Best of One stuff, tier list as well. I think you'll enjoy that. For those of you that have questions, comments, please let me know down below. If you got things that you'd like me to touch on that I didn't, please ask. Always happy to help and provide opinions. Lastly, today we talked about the tier list, what it was, and provided the tier list. We also gave a overview of observations between best of 1, best of 3, but also kind of trending within the meta. And then finally, we walked through at a high level all the decks. Again, deck list is available for you down below if you have questions or need access to those more defined lists. Please go into those videos. The list will be available for you, or those links. And then additionally, you can go to my website and get access to all the lists as well. All right, Planeswalkers, that is a mouthful. I absolutely love doing this stuff for you. I hope you enjoy it. I think many of you do. Please feel free to stay in touch. Always happy to help, and getting ready for the rotation myself and getting prepped for the last few days of ranked here. Hopefully we can get another qualifier. As always, don't like to push you guys out because I like seeing a lot of players in there, but hey, it is what it is. So with that said, Planeswalkers, you stay safe. Looking forward to seeing you again soon, and enjoy the list, and hopefully it will bear you plenty of fruit in your Magic the Gathering gameplay. All right, we'll see you soon. Stay safe. Mythras out.